Morning the lake looked like someone had spilled a bucket of paint across it, thick and milky, and my dog Rosie went down to sniff and came back stumbling like she'd been hit by a wave. That's where it started, simple and awful. And if you asked me a week earlier whether I'd be standing in a courtroom hallway telling strangers what I saw, I'd have laughed and told you to stop being dramatic. Life wasn't supposed to be dramatic around Willowmere Cove, just mowers, fishing lines, gossip over Fincesso. When things went sideways, they went sideways fast. My name's Hank Mercer. I grew up on 2 hands and a toolbox. I work with my head and my back, and the lake is the one small soft thing I've got: early mornings, a coffee, a bobber, and the quiet. It's where I learned to breathe after a week of deadlines and generator noise. So when the water turned and the fish floated and the dogs got sick, something inside me cracked. Not just because it was my place, but because the people who were supposed to care for the neighborhood had lied. They'd lied in a way that made kids cough and old men throw up. Claudia Voss ran the Homeowners Association, and she ran it the way people run small kingdoms, with rules, with fines, with the kind of charm that locks you into doing what she wants without you even noticing. Pristine hedge lines, perfectly painted mailboxes, the Willowmere standard stamped on every complaint. She loved order the way other people love church. At first I thought it was just personality. Later, when I found the invoices, I learned that personality can be expensive, and sometimes it's poisonous. The first week felt like a bad dream you can't wake from. Someone put up a sign by the dock that said "Lake Maintenance Do Not Enter," official looking, laminated, clipped to the post like it belonged there forever. Kids stayed away, people scowled, and Claudia sent a mass email that read "Calm and corporate, we treated for algae, nothing to worry about." Nobody read past "nothing to worry about" except me and Marisol, who works for the county environmental office and happens to be married to my cousin. Marisol was the one who looked at the water samples and said, quietly, "Hank, this isn't algaseed. This is industrial-grade stuff. You think the word industrial sits on paper, but hearing it said about the place you fish it has weight." She told me the chemicals she found on the lab report. She told me how they should never be used in a small lake. She told me what the health department would say if they knew. I remember the way she looked at me, like she was offering a lifeline. We started sneaking pictures, pulling camera footage from the cul-de-sac cameras, and what we found was a truck old, unmarked at 3 in the morning, 2 people with gloves, and containers with labels scratched off. The board posted a contractor name later, New Day Aquatics. The invoice said algaseed. The bank records, those didn't match. It's funny how little things add up. A scratched-off label, a forwarded email, a late-night delivery log. People who have nothing to hide are sloppy. People who are hiding things are sloppy in predictable ways. One invoice led to another. The trail pointed back to a company that had never been to Willowmere, then to a P.O. box, and then to Claudia's assistant's credit card. It happened with a meeting in the community hall that smelled of coffee and old carpet. About 70 faces pressed into folding chairs. Claudia sat at the head of the table with her smile on like a mayor at a ribbon cutting. She tried to talk calm. "We did what was necessary to preserve the lake," she said, and someone laughed, a short, bitter sound from the back, "because preserving a lake doesn't make dogs throw up." I tried to be calm too. I told the room, plain, that we had samples showing copper sulfate and something called benzalkonium industrial concentrations, and that the county was involved. "You're scaring people," Claudia snapped at me, like the person saying, "There's a fire," was the problem. That's when she lost it, not with me, but because she realized everyone was looking at her with the same question. Why? People have reasons for the things they do. Maybe Claudia thought she could save the community's property values by getting rid of something she saw as unsightly. Maybe she thought a drastic move would cement her reputation as a fixer. Maybe she felt small in other parts of her life and found power in deciding who could plant what along the shoreline. Power wears a lot of masks. It rarely wears honesty. Once the county inspectors started showing up, the story split into 2 camps. Some people leaned toward Claudia out of loyalty or fear of fines, or the uncomfortable math of admitting they'd been wrong. Others, the ones whose pets got sick, the ones who'd fished the lake since their parents did, wanted answers. The news came, because it always does in small towns when something dramatic happens. Cameras with glossy eyes, reporters who smell like last-minute adrenaline, and the kind of questions that force everyone to pick a side on camera. The most cinematic part, the part people rewind in their heads later, was the day the HOA board tried to hold a fact session, and Marisol walked in with a stack of documents thick enough to be a book. She laid down bank transfers, purchase orders, emails with timestamps that didn't match Claudia's calming narrative. "These aren't contractor records," she said, and the room got that low, hollow quiet when something important changes shape. Claudia's face. It went hard, then small. "You have no proof," she said, but proof was sitting on the table like a mute witness. Conversations turned into threats. Not physical at first, but the kind of menacing you get when people feel they're standing slipping. "Someone left a note on my truck. Watch your dog." Another person slashed tires on a neighbor's pickup. The surveillance footage, we had footage of the truck dumping the containers, vanished the night before the investigators wanted it. Someone had cut the feed. When you start cutting feeds, it's not small anymore. It's intentional. The county brought in prosecutors. There were subpoenas and lawyers who smelled like lemon and old books, and for a week it felt like living inside a loop. Interviews, depositions, the same facts told over and over until your throat burned from repeating them. Claudia hired a high-priced attorney who specialized in PR as much as defense. His first move was to attack Marisol's credibility, which, in a town where family ties and grudges matter, was like swinging a machete. People who should have testified hesitated. The court of public opinion is weird. It tilts on gossip and fear as easily as facts. Still, the physical evidence was stubborn. Tests on the shoreline turned up strange concentrations. Receipts traced payments to accounts connected to HOA expenses, and two former board members, tired and scared and maybe a little guilty, rolled over and told investigators what they knew. The charges were filed: reckless endangerment, illegal disposal of chemicals, misuse of association funds. They were heavy words for a quiet neighborhood, and they hung in the air like a storm that wouldn't move on. There was a moment, right before the trial, when Claudia called me. The sound of her voice over the phone, the smile you can hear, the practiced softness. She said, "Hank, this could have been handled privately. You've turned neighbors against each other." I could have said, "You poisoned children's play areas," and lied. I could have yelled. Instead I said, "We could have handled this by telling the truth." Silence is its own kind of verdict sometimes. Court wasn't a TV courtroom. It was fluorescent lights and a tired judge who wanted to be home and jurors who took notes like they were taking inventory of their lives. Evidence was laid out: lab reports, bank transfers, a security camera clip that we swore we'd never get back until a tech found a backup on a neighbor's old DVR. There was testimony from people who cried and from people who were angry and from Claudia, who sat there and explained choices like they were tiny hard things that had to be made. The jury didn't need to be melodramatic. They were just people measuring whether the facts matched the explanations. They did. The verdict was more complicated than a one-word headline. There were convictions, some things Claudia was held accountable for, and then settlements and fines and repair orders. The lake didn't bounce back overnight. Remediation took months. Trucks, pumps, scientists in rubber suits, and a lot of money that nobody wanted to pay, but that had to be spent to make the water swimmable again. Community meetings turned into volunteer cleanups. People who'd argued over mailboxes began picking up trash together. There was a small, imperfect healing, the kind where scars are visible, but people have learned to live around them. A few neighbors still defend her choices online. She wasn't all bad, they say. She kept the lawns nice. That's the thing about truth. It's messy. It doesn't always produce saints. And sometimes people hold two contradictory beliefs at once. If there's a lesson here, it's not a tidy one. It's not that villains are obvious or that systems always work. It's that silence can be consent, and speaking up can be lonely and expensive, but sometimes necessary. I lost some things: respect from people who thought I should have minding my own business, a few quiet friendships, but I got others, a clearer conscience, a deeper sense of what I care about, and a lake that, slowly, feels like mine again. So tell me, what would you have done? Do you think justice was served? Or did someone just get blamed and then life went on? Drop a comment, tell your side. And if you've seen something like this happen where you live, share it.